This is the Monocle Daily. We're live from Studio One at Midori House in London. My next guest has described his father as a real patriot. It's perhaps rather an odd description because his father is currently in prison, accused of having links to terrorism. Murat Sabuncu is the editor-in-chief of the Turkish daily newspaper, the Cumhuriyet. It's a publication which has not shied away from criticising the regime of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Over a year ago, he and 11 colleagues were arrested and detained. While his son, Muratcan Sabuncu, joins me now. A very warm welcome to the Monocle Daily, Muratcan. Could you just explain to us what happened to your father?
He was arrested by Turkish police following a raid in his apartment on October 2016. He's still in prison in Istanbul. He's not yet sentenced. My father and his colleagues are accused of acting on behalf of a terrorist organization without being a member, with the only evidence against them being a number of news items published in Cumhuriyet, which were regarded by the domestic court as a propaganda for FETÖ and PKK.
So the evidence that convicted him was entirely based on what had appeared in a newspaper, the Cumhuriyet, which enjoys a very good reputation in Turkey. What was it that so offended the court?
What caused problem is certainly the independent journalism that they are doing in Turkey.
When was the last time you spoke to him?
I spoke to him 2 weeks ago. It was a phone call because he has rights to phone calls twice a month.
And how is he?
He's doing very well because he knows that he's doing the right thing, which is defending liberty of expression and of the press in Turkey and doing his job as a journalist.
The impression that many of us get from the outside is that Turkey is a place where to be a journalist is a dangerous profession that can make things like what has happened to your father happen. How dangerous is it now to speak your mind in Turkey?
It's unfortunately dangerous, as the example of Cumhuriyet shows it. The trial itself is a message to other journalists to say that if they do their job as journalists independently, and if they criticize the government and the president, they could have trouble. They could be sent to the prison. They could have trials without any evidence. They could be harassed.
How surprised were you about the speed with which freedom of speech has been eroded in Turkey?
It was fast, I think. And after the failed coup in 2016, the deterioration of the freedom of expression became more visible as lots of media outlets were closed and lots of journalists were imprisoned. This deterioration went hand in hand with the deterioration of the independence and impartiality of the judiciary in Turkey.
What do other countries do to help you? What can they do?
They are already doing a lot because lots of international institutions and non-governmental organizations work very hard to make visible Cumhuriyet trial. Lots of journalists publish articles in their journals to support their solidarity with their colleagues, their Turkish colleagues. And lots of bridges are now constructed because a lot of European and international democrats are with us, are showing solidarity, are raising awareness about the subject.
And when do you think your father will be released?
Unfortunately, in Turkey, due to the situation of the judiciary, nothing is foreseeable.
And how does that make you feel?
I'm very confident because I have a very strong father who is in prison because of his values. So I'm very strong, and anyone or any political party, any politician can change this.
Muratcan Sabuncu, thank you very much for joining us. On the line is Yonca Shuk. Her husband Ahmet is in prison as well. He's also a reporter for the Cumhuriyet. Yonca, you've come over from Turkey to Paris to talk about what's happening in your country. Can you explain to us what it's like living there at the moment in terms of freedom of speech?
It's not easy to explain this to the European community, but it's very hard. There is very strong pressure on not only on journalists or politicians. There is a really hard pressure on all of the community, all the people in Turkey.
In what way? How do people feel this pressure?
For example, last week after the war starts, people were detained by police because of their tweets. These kind of things makes the people very afraid.
What's life like in prison for someone like your husband who has written things in a newspaper which in any other Western country people would just accept as freedom of speech?
It's not the first time that my husband is arrested. He was also arrested in 2011 for 13 months. At that time, he was writing a book, which was just a draft. It was about, the name was The Imam's Army. Maybe you have heard about that. It was just a draft. He was trying to explain how the Gülen sect, which is called today by the government FETÖ terror organization, how they are organized in the state, especially in the police department and in the judiciary department. And my husband was arrested because of writing this book. And the book was defined as a terror document at that time. And now he is arrested again for making, at the beginning he was, the charges were making propaganda of the FETÖ terror organization and PKK and DHKPC. Now they took the FETÖ terror organization out of the indictment, but the proofs and the content is still the same. Now we have state of emergency, and they are the political, I don't want to say prisoners, I want to say hostage, because they are political hostages. They are isolated. For example, my husband was around 7.5 months isolated. He could not see his lawyers. Just 1 hour in a week by camera recording, and with a security guy who is taking care that they don't share documents. They were not be able to prepare their defense. Now he can see his lawyers, but it was also not allowed to write letters or to get letters, not to give him books and these kind of things. I can see him once in a week behind glass, thick glass, and talking by telephone. And I can see him only once in 2 months without this glass, and where I don't have the feeling that someone is listening to us. In 2011, I could see him once in a month without this glass. And this kind of conditions, if you want, I can give you more details, but these kind of conditions are totally different. But this isolation thing is what makes us at that time the life harder.
How is he coping?
He's very strong. He's very angry because it's unfair that he's in prison, and he is right. He didn't make anything wrong, and he believes in himself, and a lot of people believes in him, and also the other Cumhuriyet prisoners. That's why this angry and this being right makes him very strong.
What do you think other governments are doing to help your cause? Do you feel as if the rest of the world is supporting you, or do you feel slightly abandoned?
A lot of people in Turkey also, they are struggling still for democratization, and they are also in solidarity with us. The international community is also we have a lot of friends, and a lot of people are in solidarity with us. I don't feel alone. After all these things are finished, these dark times are in the past, we will only remember the solidarity and how strong we were in these hard times. Same in 2011, and I'm sure it will be the same in the future.
Yonca Şık, thank you very much for joining us on Monocle 24.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers